Lord, what do I do now?
Do not follow the voice that speaks louder than my spirit.
Welcome to Deeper Love Story Hub. If you love emotional, inspiring, and life-changing stories like this one, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story. Your support helps this channel grow and bring more meaningful stories to life. Purity has always learned to trust God. She had always believed that if she prayed enough and stayed true to her faith, God would lead her path. That belief had been her anchor back when she lived with her grandparents, who taught her to listen for the still, small voice of the Holy Spirit. But since she moved back into her parents' mansion, the silence of her prayer life had been replaced by the loud, commanding voice of her mother, Madame Mabel. She watched her friends climbing the social ladder, and she heard the whispers of her parents about securing the family name through a high-status marriage. At 25, Purity was successful in her fashion house, but she was exhausted from trying to please everyone. She wanted to honor her mother, but she was starting to wonder if she had been waiting on God for too long. She wanted someone who fit her parents' image of a perfect life. The drive back to her parents' house felt longer than Purity remembered. She sat in the back of the taxi, watching the city go by. Tall buildings, shiny cars, people walking fast, like they had somewhere very important to be. She had spent the last 3 years in her grandparents' quiet home in the countryside. Grandpa Emmanuel and Grandma Ruth were gentle, kind people who loved God with everything they had. Every morning, they would sit around the table and read the Bible together. Every evening, they would hold hands and pray. It was in that house that Purity had learned to hear the Holy Spirit, that soft, calm voice that always felt like peace. But Grandpa Emmanuel had gone to be with the Lord in March. Grandma Ruth followed him just 2 months later. The doctors said she died of old age. But Purity believed Grandma Ruth simply could not live without the man she had loved for 50 years. After the funeral, Purity had no reason to stay in the countryside. Her fashion house, Pure Threads, was doing well. She had 2 assistants and a small shop in the city. It made sense to move back home. At least, that was what she told herself. The taxi turned into a long, clean road lined with tall trees. At the end of the road stood the big white mansion where Purity had grown up. It had 6 bedrooms, a large swimming pool, and a garden that her mother paid 3 people to take care of. It was a beautiful house. But it had never felt like a home to Purity, not the way her grandparents' small, warm cottage had. "We are here, madam," the taxi driver said. Purity paid him and stepped out. She had barely lifted her bag when the front door swung open. "Purity, you are finally here." Her mother, Madame Mabel, stood at the door in a bright yellow dress and high heels. She was a tall, beautiful woman with sharp eyes and a strong voice. She never entered a room quietly. She always arrived like the whole world needed to take notice. Behind her, Purity's younger sister Esther came running out, her braids flying. "Sister Purity." Esther jumped and threw her arms around Purity's neck. She was 15 and full of energy. Purity laughed and held her tight. "I missed you," Esther whispered. "I missed you too, small one." Inside, their father, Mr. Francis, sat in the living room reading a newspaper. He was a quiet man, the opposite of his wife in every way. He greeted Purity with a warm smile and a slow nod. "Welcome home, my girl," he said softly. That evening, as Purity unpacked her things in her old bedroom, she noticed how quiet it was, not the good kind of quiet she had known at her grandparents' house, but an empty quiet. She sat on her bed and opened her Bible, but her mind kept drifting to Gabriel. She had called him earlier. His voice had been warm and steady, the way it always was. "I am praying for you," he had said. "God is with you, Purity. Just keep your eyes on him." She smiled at the memory. Gabriel was not a rich man. He worked as a teacher and helped at the church on weekends. He did not wear expensive suits or drive a big car. But he loved God and he loved her. That had always been enough. There was a knock at her door. Madame Mabel entered with a cup of warm tea. She sat beside Purity and looked at her with those sharp eyes. "Now that you are back home, things will be different," her mother said. You are not a little girl anymore. It is time to think seriously about your future. What do you mean, Mummy? Her mother smiled, not the soft kind. The kind that meant she had already decided something. We will talk tomorrow. Get some rest. She kissed Purity on the forehead and left. Purity sat alone in the quiet room. In her heart, she heard that still, gentle voice. Stay close to me, my child. Do not let the noise of this house drown out my voice. I will, Lord, she whispered. I will try. But even as she said it, she could feel the warmth of that promise starting to flicker, like a small candle left alone in a room full of open windows. The next morning, Purity woke up early. She washed her face, made her bed, and sat by the window with her Bible and a cup of tea. The garden outside was quiet and full of soft morning light. She read from Proverbs 3, Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. She said a short prayer, asking God to guide her day. Then she went downstairs for breakfast. Her father was already at the table, eating toast and reading the news on his tablet. Her mother was standing near the kitchen, talking to the cook in a firm, low voice. When Madame Mabel saw Purity, she smiled and pointed to a chair. Sit down. We have something to discuss. Purity sat. She looked at her father. He kept his eyes on his tablet. That was never a good sign. Esther was not yet awake. She slept late on weekdays. Her mother sat across from her and folded her hands on the table. Purity, your father and I have been talking. You are 25 years old. You have your fashion house. You are doing well. But there is one thing missing. What thing, Mummy? The right man, her mother said simply. Purity put down her fork. I have Gabriel. Gabriel. Her mother said his name slowly, like it was a word she did not like the taste of. A school teacher. A man who earns a small salary and sings in a church choir. Purity, you deserve more than that. Mummy, Gabriel is a good man. He loves God. Enough. Madame Mabel held up her hand. Your father and I have spoken with Chief Pius. Purity blinked. Chief Pius? The big businessman. Yes. Her mother smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. He has a son. His name is Henry. He is 30 years old. He studied abroad. He works in his father's company and will inherit everything, the properties, the contracts, the name. If you marry Henry, your fashion house will not just be a small shop. It will be an empire. Silence fell over the table. Daddy, what do you think? Purity asked. Mr. Francis looked up from his tablet. His face was kind but tired. Your mother knows what she is doing, he said quietly. Then he looked back at his screen. Purity felt something cold settle in her chest. She did not know Henry. She did not love Henry. She loved Gabriel. Mummy, you cannot plan my marriage for me. This is my life. Madame Mabel looked at her steadily. And who do you think paid for the life you are living? Who paid for your school? Your first sewing machine? The money to start your fashion house? She shook her head. We gave you everything, Purity. All we are asking is that you make a wise choice. Purity stared at her plate. She wanted to argue. But her mother's words sat heavy on her like a stone she could not lift. Later that afternoon, her best friend Fiona called. Fiona always knew when something was wrong. Talk to me, Fiona said. You sound like someone stepped on your joy. Purity told her everything. Fiona was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Purity, I love you. But your mother is not the enemy. She just does not know God the way you do. Pray first. Then speak. After the call, Purity rang Gabriel. They want me to meet Chief Pius's son, she said, her voice small. There was a short silence. Then Gabriel spoke, calm and steady as always. Purity, what does God say? She pressed her hand to her chest. She knew the answer. She had felt it that morning during her prayer. But knowing the right answer and choosing it were two very different things. I don't know, she whispered. Yes, you do, Gabriel said gently. Pray about it. Do not let fear make the choice for you. She hung up and sat alone in her room. Outside, she could hear her mother on the phone, already making plans. But deep inside Purity, a gentle voice was speaking. My child, do not trade what is true for what is shiny. Fame is not the same as peace. Purity closed her eyes. A tear rolled down her cheek. She was not sure which voice she would listen to. But she knew deep in the part of her heart that still remembered her grandparents' prayers, that the choice she made next would change everything. Saturday morning was the best kind of morning. The sun was warm but not too hot, and the streets near the church were quiet. Purity walked through the Gate of Grace Assembly with a small bag on her shoulder and a smile on her face. This was the one place where everything felt right. She found Gabriel near the side of the building, helping two young boys carry chairs into the hall for the morning Bible class. He was wearing a plain white shirt and simple trousers. His shoes were clean but not new. He looked up when he heard her footsteps and his whole face lit up. "You came," he said. "I told you I would," she replied. He handed the last chair to one of the boys and walked over to her. He did not rush. He just looked at her for a moment, the way he always did, like she was something worth taking time to see. "You look tired," he said softly. "I am fine. Let us not talk about the house today. I just want one normal morning." He nodded. That was one of the things she loved most about Gabriel. He never pushed. He never demanded. He simply made space for her to breathe. After the Bible class, they sat together under the big mango tree behind the church. Purity had brought a small container of chin-chin. They shared it between them, talking about small, good things, a funny story one of the children had told, a Bible verse that had surprised Gabriel that week, a new fabric she had ordered for a dress design. "Tell me about the design," he said, leaning forward with real interest. Purity smiled and pulled out her small notebook. She always carried it. Inside were sketches of dresses, notes about colors, small measurements. She flipped it open and showed him a drawing of a long evening gown with wide sleeves. "I am calling it the Grace gown," she said. "I want to use deep blue fabric, the kind that looks almost like the night sky. And here, at the sleeves, I want to add tiny gold stitching." Gabriel looked at the drawing carefully. "This is beautiful, Purity. Truly. You say that about everything I draw. Because everything you draw is beautiful." He looked up at her. "God gave you a real gift. I hope you know that." She looked down at the notebook. A warm feeling spread through her chest. Gabriel had always believed in her work, even before she had her first customer. When she was just starting out, he had prayed with her over her sewing table, asking God to bless the work of her hands. She had never forgotten that. "Gabriel," she said quietly, "what if things have to change? What if I cannot keep things the way they are right now?" He was quiet for a moment. A bird called out from the tree above them. "What do you mean?" he asked. She did not answer right away. She was thinking of her mother's voice at breakfast. She was thinking of Chief Pius's son and the word empire. She was thinking of all the things her mother had said about settling for small things. "Nothing," she said finally. "I am just thinking out loud." Gabriel looked at her steadily. "Purity, I want you to know something. I am not in a hurry. I am not afraid of waiting. But I need you to be honest with me and with God about what is in your heart." She met his eyes. They were calm and clear, without anger or fear. "Just truth." "I know," she whispered. "Whatever is happening at home," he said, "do not make a decision out of fear. Fear is a bad guide. It will take you somewhere you do not want to go." She nodded slowly. She wanted to say more. She wanted to tell him everything. But the words would not come. Instead, she just sat beside him under the mango tree in the warm Saturday morning and let the peace of that quiet place hold her for a little while longer. She did not know how few Saturdays like this she had left. It happened on a Tuesday evening. Purity had just returned from her fashion house, tired but happy. She had finished a wedding dress that day, a beautiful ivory gown with lace along the sleeves. The bride had cried happy tears when she tried it on. Purity had gone home with a full heart. But the moment she stepped inside the mansion, she knew something was wrong. Madame Mabel was standing in the living room with her arms folded. Esther was sitting quietly in the corner, reading a book and pretending not to listen. Mr. Francis was nowhere to be seen. "Close the door," her mother said. Purity closed the door and sat down. "Good evening, Mummy." "Sit down." She sat. Her mother walked slowly to the window and looked out at the garden for a moment. Then she turned around. "I heard you went to that church again on Saturday. To see Gabriel." Purity was silent. Esther turned a page in her book, but her eyes were not moving. Purity, I am going to say this one time, and I need you to hear me clearly. Madame Mabel's voice was low and very firm. You will stop seeing Gabriel. You will stop calling him. You will stop going to that church to meet him. It is finished. Purity felt the air leave her body. Mummy, I said finished. You cannot tell me who to love. Madame Mabel stepped forward. I am not telling you who to love. I am telling you who to marry. And it will not be a poor teacher who cannot even buy you a decent ring. I did not suffer to give you a good life, so you could throw it away on a man with nothing. Gabriel has something, Purity said, her voice shaking. He is God. He has a good heart. Good hearts do not pay school fees. Good hearts do not build businesses. Her mother looked at her with tired eyes. I have been patient long enough. Next Friday, you will come with me to Chief Pius's home for dinner. You will meet Henry, you will be polite, and you will be open-minded. That is all I am asking. And what about Henry? Purity asked. You keep mentioning Henry. Her mother's expression changed slightly, a small smile. Henry is Chief Pius's son. He is also coming to dinner. He is a businessman. Successful, handsome, and from a very good family. She paused. He has already asked about you. Purity stared at her. He does not even know me. He knows enough. Madame Mabel picked up her phone from the table, a sign that the conversation was over. Friday, 7 o'clock. Wear something nice. She walked out of the room. Purity sat very still. Esther put down her book and came to sit beside her sister. She was only 15, but her eyes were wise and full of feeling. Sister Purity, she said softly, I will pray for you. Purity looked at her little sister and felt tears burn the back of her eyes. She wrapped her arm around Esther and pulled her close. Thank you, small one, she said. Later that night, Purity knelt beside her bed. She did not have many words. She just stayed on her knees in the dark, her hands folded, her heart open. And in the silence, the gentle voice came again. My child, you're not alone. I see you. Hold on to me. I am trying, Lord, she whispered. I am really trying. Friday came too quickly. Purity stood in front of her mirror, dressed in a soft green dress with gold earrings. She looked beautiful, even she could see that. But her eyes were sad. She had barely eaten all week. Fiona had called that morning. How are you feeling? She asked. Like I am walking into a trap, Purity said. Fiona was quiet for a moment. Purity, you do not have to do anything you do not want to do. Going to dinner is not the same as saying yes to a marriage. Just go. Be polite. Then come home and pray. And Gabriel? What do I tell Gabriel? Another silence. Tell him the truth. He deserves that. After the call, Purity sat on her bed for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called Gabriel. He answered on the second ring, warm and cheerful as always. Purity, I was just thinking about you. How was your day? She closed her eyes. Gabriel, I need to talk to you. Something in her voice must have warned him, because he went quiet. What is wrong? She took a deep breath. My mother, she has made things very difficult. She wants me to stop seeing you. She has arranged for me to meet someone else. And I do not know how to fight her anymore. I am tired, Gabriel. I am so tired. Silence. Gabriel, say something. I am here, he said. His voice was steady, but she could hear the pain underneath it, like water running below a layer of ice. Are you telling me it is over? Tears spilled down Purity's face. I do not want it to be. But my mother, she will not stop. And my father says nothing. And I am living in their house and I feel so trapped. Purity. His voice was gentle but clear. I will not beg you to stay. I love you. But love does not hold people by force. If you feel you must go, I will not stop you. She sobbed quietly into the phone. But I want you to hear me, Gabriel continued. What God has joined, no mother's voice can separate unless you allow it. The question is not what your mother wants. The question is what God wants. And you already know the answer. She could not speak. I will pray for you, he said softly. Every day, no matter what happens. You will always be in my prayers, Purity. The call ended. Purity sat on the edge of her bed and cried until her chest hurt. She cried for Gabriel. She cried for the peace she was leaving behind. She cried for the girl she had been at her grandparents' house, reading the Bible by candlelight, so sure that God would lead her path. Where was that girl now? Esther knocked on the door and peeked in. She saw her sister's face and came in without a word. She sat down beside her and held her hand. They sat like that for a long time, two sisters, one carrying a weight too heavy for her heart, and one too young to carry it for her but old enough to stay. "Mummy is calling," Esther finally said, very quietly. "It is time to go." Purity wiped her face. She looked at herself in the mirror one last time. The green dress, the gold earrings, the sad eyes. She stood up and walked out of the room. And somewhere deep inside her, something small and precious went very, very quiet. Chief Pius's home was even bigger than Purity's parents' mansion. There were tall iron gates, 2 guards in uniforms, and a long driveway lit up with lights on both sides. When their car pulled up, a man in a white jacket came out to open the door. Madame Mabel stepped out like she had been here 100 times. Purity followed, her stomach tight. Inside, the house was full of expensive things, large paintings on the walls, a chandelier that looked like a waterfall of glass, thick rugs on every floor. A soft smell of cologne and good food filled the air. Chief Pius was a big man with a wide smile and a loud laugh. He shook Madame Mabel's hand warmly and looked at Purity with kind eyes. His son Henry was tall and well-dressed, but quiet. He smiled politely and said little all through dinner. "Henry." He walked into the dining room 15 minutes after everyone was seated, without apology. He wore a charcoal gray suit that looked as if it had been made just for him. His watch was gold. His shoes were polished to a shine. He sat down, snapped his fingers for a servant to bring him water, and looked around the table like a man who owned the room. He was handsome. Very handsome. That was the first thing Purity noticed. The second thing she noticed was the way he spoke. "So you're the fashion girl," he said to her, halfway through the main course, without looking up from his plate. "I run a fashion house," Purity said carefully. "Pure threads." He took a sip of his drink. "Small scale for now. You would need the right connections to grow." Purity blinked. She had not asked for his opinion. Her mother, sitting across the table, smiled brightly. "Henry knows everyone in this city. He could be very helpful to your business, Purity." Henry finally looked directly at Purity. His eyes were sharp and dark. "Your mother is right. I know people. The right introduction can change everything." There was no warmth in his voice. Only the cool confidence of a man who had never been told no. Purity smiled politely and turned back to her food. On the drive home, Madame Mabel could not stop talking. "Did you see his watch? Did you hear how he spoke? Henry is exactly the kind of man who can take you places, Purity. Henry is fine, but Henry has power." Purity looked out the car window at the dark streets going by. "He was rude, Mummy," she said quietly. Madame Mabel waved her hand. "Confident men can seem rude at first. You will understand when you know him better." Purity said nothing more. But in her heart, something had noticed something. A shadow. A small, dark thing she could not name yet. That night, lying in bed, she thought about Gabriel. She thought about the way he had looked at her under the mango tree, like she was something worth taking time to see. She thought about the way Henry had looked at her, like she was something he had not yet decided if he wanted. The difference between the two was as wide as the sky. She reached for her Bible on the bedside table. She opened it without looking, and her eyes fell on a verse from Proverbs 16 verse 18. "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." She read it twice. Then she closed the Bible, turned off her light, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. She did not sleep well that night. 3 weeks passed. Henry called Purity twice. The first time, he invited her to a rooftop party with people she needed to know. The second time, he asked if she had thought about his offer to introduce her to some big fashion buyers in the city. Both times, her mother had been standing nearby, nodding eagerly. Both times, Purity had said yes. She told herself it was just business. She was not in a relationship with Henry. She was simply using his connections, the way any smart businesswoman would. That was what she told Fiona when her best friend called to check on her. Purity, Fiona said slowly, be careful. There is a difference between using someone's connections and letting someone use you. He is not using me, Purity said. But even as she said it, something inside her felt uneasy. She had stopped going to her old church. It was easier than explaining to people why Gabriel was no longer around. She had found a new church closer to home, a big, modern one with loud music and a pastor who mostly preached about success and wealth. It was not wrong, but it was not the same. The quiet, searching feeling she used to get when she prayed had become harder to find. One evening, she was alone in her bedroom, looking over fabric samples for a new collection. She had her music playing softly in the background. Everything seemed normal. Then it happened. A deep, heavy sadness fell over her, not like tiredness, but like grief. Like something she loved was very far away. She turned off the music. The room was very quiet. She sat still for a long time. Then she heard it. That same gentle voice she had been trying not to hear for weeks. My child, you're drifting. Come back. The path you are walking is not the one I chose for you. Purity's hands went still on the fabric samples. Lord, she whispered. The feeling did not leave. It stayed on her like a warm, sad weight, like the hand of someone who loved her and was watching her walk in the wrong direction. She got up from her desk and knelt beside her bed. She had not done this in weeks. Her knees felt strange on the floor, like she had forgotten the shape of that position. Lord, I am sorry, she whispered. I know I have been moving away from you. I know I ended things with Gabriel to please my mother. I know I have been following the wrong voice. She paused. But Lord, I am afraid. I am afraid of my mother's anger. I am afraid of disappointing my family. I am afraid of being alone. She waited in the quiet. The voice did not shout. It never shouted. It simply spoke with a kindness that broke her heart open. Fear is not from me. I have not given you a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Come back to me, Purity. It is not too late. She stayed on her knees for a long time that night, crying quietly. But the next morning, when her mother knocked on her door and said Henry had invited them both to his office to discuss a business partnership, Purity stood up, got dressed, and went. The warning had been heard, but it had not yet been obeyed. And that was the saddest thing of all. It started with a suggestion. Henry came to the fashion house one afternoon, wearing another perfect suit, carrying a coffee he had not offered to share. He walked around the small shop, looking at the dresses on the rail, the fabric bolts against the wall, the cutting table at the back where Purity's two assistants were working. It is a good space, he said. Small, but good. Thank you, Purity said, ignoring the word small. You should change your pricing, he said. Your dresses are too cheap. Cheap prices make people think cheap quality. Raise everything by 40%. Purity looked at him. My customers are mostly middle-income women. If I raise prices by 40% overnight, I will lose them. Henry shrugged. You want to move up in this business or not? You cannot serve everybody. Pick your market. Purity hesitated. Her mother had been pushing her to think bigger. Fiona had warned her to be careful. But Henry had already introduced her to two well-known socialites who had ordered custom dresses. Their orders alone had brought in more money than 6 regular clients. So she raised the prices. Within 2 weeks, 4 of her most loyal customers stopped coming. Then came the fabric order. Henry told her about a supplier he knew who sold imported Italian fabric at a very good price. He handled the communication himself, saying it would be faster. When the fabric arrived, it was the wrong color, the wrong weight, and the delivery was 3 weeks late. Purity had already promised 2 brides their dresses. She had to work through 2 nights to fix the problem. Her assistants were exhausted. One of them, a young woman named Ada, cried at her sewing machine from tiredness. I am sorry, Ada, Purity said, bringing her water. I am so sorry. When Purity told Henry what had happened, he frowned. The supplier made a mistake. That happens. Stop being emotional about it. Stop being emotional. Those words landed hard. Gabriel had never told her to stop feeling. Gabriel had always made room for her feelings. Henry made room only for results. Fiona came to visit the shop one afternoon and found Purity staring at a stack of invoices, her face drawn and pale. "Purity, what is happening to you?" Fiona asked, putting her hand on her friend's shoulder. "You look like you have not slept in days." "I am fine," Purity said automatically. "You are not fine. This is not the Purity I know." Fiona looked around the shop and then back at her friend. "Since Henry started coming around, everything feels different. Even you. You're different." Purity opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Because she knew Fiona was right. She was different. And the difference was not good. That evening, she opened her Bible to Proverbs 14 verse 12. "There is a way that seems right to a person, but its end is the way of death." She read it 3 times. Then she put the Bible down and sat in the silence. Outside, the city hummed and rushed and moved without her. Inside, something in her was very, very still and very, very afraid. The night everything fell apart began as the most beautiful night of Purity's career. Henry had arranged for Pure Threads to be the featured designer at a large charity gala, one of the biggest social events of the year. 200 guests, television cameras, journalists with cameras, fashion editors with notebooks. It was exactly the kind of event Madame Mabel had always dreamed of for her daughter. Purity had worked for 3 weeks to prepare 12 showcase dresses. She had not slept properly in days. Her eyes were ringed with tiredness, but the dresses were stunning. Even she could see that. She had poured everything into them, every skill she had, every prayer she had half-whispered over her sewing machine in the early morning hours. Esther had come to help with the final preparations. Her little sister pinned hems and pressed fabric and said quietly, "These are the most beautiful dresses I have ever seen, Sister Purity." Purity had hugged her. The gala was held in a grand hotel ballroom. Lights, music, laughter, the clink of glasses. Madame Mabel arrived in her best dress and greeted people she barely knew like old friends. Mr. Francis stood politely beside her. Fiona came as Purity's guest and held her hand at the entrance. "You did it," Fiona whispered. "These dresses are incredible." For the first hour, everything was perfect. The models walked. The crowd applauded. A fashion editor pulled Purity aside and said she wanted to feature Pure Threads in her magazine. Then Henry arrived late, again, with 2 men Purity did not know. He had been drinking. His eyes were bright and careless, and he moved through the room like he owned it. He pulled Purity aside near the back of the hall. "I invited some investors tonight. I told them Pure Threads is looking for a business partner. Someone to buy in and co-own the brand." Purity froze. "You did what?" "I never agreed to that. Pure Threads is mine. I do not want a co-owner." Henry waved his hand. "Do not be dramatic. This is how business works." "Do not tell me how my business works." Her voice rose higher than she meant it to. People nearby turned to look. "Lower your voice," Henry said, his own voice going cold. "I will not lower my voice. You went behind my back." "I was trying to help you," he snapped. "You should be thanking me, not embarrassing me in public." "Embarrassing you?" Purity's eyes went wide. "You came into my business and made decisions without asking me. You broke my trust. And now you want me to thank you." By now, a small group of people had gathered. Someone had a phone out. A journalist was scribbling. Henry looked at her with cold, flat eyes. "You are nothing without my help," he said, his voice low and sharp. "You would still be sewing dresses for market women if it were not for me." The room went very quiet. Purity felt as though she had been slapped. She stood very still, her heart hammering, her eyes burning. Then she turned and walked out of the ballroom. Fiona followed her out to the corridor. Purity stood against the wall, shaking. The sounds of the gala floated through the closed doors, music, conversation, the pretending that nothing had happened. "Purity," Fiona said gently, putting both hands on her friend's shoulders. "Look at me." Purity looked up. Her eyes were full of tears. "He was wrong," Fiona said firmly. "Every word he said was wrong. You hear me?" Purity nodded. But the words had already gone in deep, the way cruel words always do. By the next morning, the argument had been posted online by 3 different people. The headline on one blog read, "Drama at Charity Gala. fashion designer and businessman in public clash. Purity's phone did not stop buzzing. Madame Mabel called 4 times. Purity did not answer. She sat on her bedroom floor with her back against the wall, her phone face down beside her, and for the first time in a long time, she did not try to pray. She just sat in the ruins of the night and felt every broken piece of it. The days after the gala were the loneliest of Purity's life. The fashion editor who had spoken about featuring pure threads sent a short message saying she would hold off for now. 2 clients called to cancel their orders. One of Purity's assistants, Ada, came in on Monday morning and handed her a resignation letter. She was kind about it. She said she had found another job, but Purity understood. The business was struggling and people could feel it. Henry did not call to apologize. He sent a short message that said only, "You overreacted. When you are ready to be professional, let me know." Purity read it once and deleted it. Madame Mabel came to Purity's room that evening. For once, her face was not full of plans. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her daughter with something Purity had not seen in a long time: uncertainty. "I saw the video," her mother said quietly. "What he said to you, that was not right." Purity looked at her. "No, Mummy. It was not." A silence stretched between them. "I wanted the best for you," Madame Mabel said, and her voice sounded smaller than usual. "I still want the best for you." "I know," Purity said. "But Mummy, you chose this man for me. You pushed me toward him. You made me end things with Gabriel so I could be with someone like Henry." She paused. "And look at where we are." Her mother said nothing. She looked at her hands. Esther, who had been hovering near the doorway, came in quietly and sat beside Purity. She did not say anything. She just leaned her head against her sister's shoulder. Purity felt tears run down her face. She let them come this time. She did not wipe them away. Fiona came the next afternoon with food in a bag and sat on the floor of Purity's room, cross-legged, the way she had sat on Purity's floor since they were teenagers. "Okay," Fiona said. "Tell me everything." So Purity told her everything. From the beginning. From the first night her mother had told her to stop seeing Gabriel. From the dinner at Chief Pius's house. From the first time Henry had walked into the room like he owned it. From the gala and the argument and the cold words. Fiona listened to all of it without interrupting. When Purity was done, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Purity, you need to go talk to Pastor Joshua." Purity shook her head. "I have not been to that church in months." "What will I say?" "You will say the truth," Fiona said simply. "That is all a pastor needs. That is all God needs." Purity looked at her hands in her lap. They were the hands of a woman who could build beauty from nothing, who could take a piece of plain cloth and turn it into something that made a bride cry. She had always known that gift came from God. She had known it. And she had walked away from the giver to chase after the wrong things. "I have made such a mess," she whispered. "Yes," Fiona said honestly. "But messes can be cleaned up. That is what grace is for." Purity sat with those words for a long time. That night, she opened her Bible for the first time in weeks. It fell open to Luke 15, the story of the lost son who came back home. She read it slowly. Then she read it again. And when she got to the part where the father ran to meet his returning child, she bent her head and cried, not from sadness, but from something she had almost forgotten the feeling of: hope. Pastor Joshua's office was a simple room. There was a wooden desk, 2 chairs, a small bookshelf full of well-read Bibles, and a potted plant on the windowsill that was somehow still alive. A verse was painted on the wall behind his desk in neat black letters: "Come to me, all who are weary, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11 verse 28. Purity sat in one of the chairs and folded her hands in her lap. She had not been back to Grace Assembly in months. She had worried the walk back through the gate would feel strange. But when she had arrived that morning and the old gatekeeper had smiled at her and said, "Welcome back, Sister Purity," she had almost started crying right there on the path. Pastor Joshua was a calm man in his 50s, with kind eyes and a slow way of speaking that made you feel like whatever you said, he had time to hear it. He set down his pen when Purity walked in and simply said, "Sit down. I am glad you came." And so Purity told him. All of it. She did not dress it up or leave parts out. She told him about her grandparents and the faith she had grown up in. She told him about Gabriel. She told him about her mother's pressure and the dinner at Chief Pius's house and her choice to let Gabriel go. She told him about Henry, his pride, his coldness, the way she had let his connections blind her to his character. She told him about the gala and the argument and the headline and the loneliness after. Pastor Joshua listened to everything. When she was done, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Purity, what you are describing is not a failure of willpower. It is a failure of listening. You heard the Holy Spirit. You heard him clearly more than once. But you chose to follow a louder voice." Purity nodded. "My mother's voice. And your own fear," Pastor Joshua added gently. "Fear of disappointing her. Fear of being seen as difficult. Fear of standing alone." He leaned forward. "Fear and faith cannot live in the same room, Purity. One of them has to leave." She looked down at her hands. "I know that now. I knew it then too. But knowing and doing are so different." "Yes," he said. "They are. That is why we need God's strength, not our own." He picked up his Bible and turned to Isaiah 30 verse 21. He read aloud, "Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you, saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.'" He closed the Bible and looked at her. "God has not stopped speaking to you, Purity. He was speaking before you came in this door. He will be speaking when you leave. The question is, are you ready to listen and obey this time? Not just hear. Obey." She thought about Gabriel. She thought about the way he had said, "I will pray for you every day." She thought about Esther leaning her head on her shoulder. She thought about Fiona sitting cross-legged on her floor, saying messes can be cleaned up. She thought about her grandparents, holding hands every evening in prayer. "Yes," she said. And this time, she meant it with her whole self. "I am ready." Pastor Joshua smiled. "Then let us pray." They prayed together for nearly an hour. Purity prayed out loud for the first time in months. She said sorry. She asked for strength. She asked God to help her repair what was broken, her business, her relationships, and most of all, her heart. When she left the church that afternoon, the sky was a clean, pale blue. The air smelled of rain that had fallen earlier. Everything looked the same as it had when she arrived. But she felt different. She felt like someone who had been very far away and had finally, at last, found her way back home. It took courage to call Gabriel. Purity sat with her phone in her hand for 20 minutes before she pressed his name. He answered on the third ring. "Purity." His voice was careful. Not cold, but careful. The voice of a man who had been hurt and was choosing to still be kind. "Gabriel," she said. "I need to see you. If you are willing. If you are not, I will understand." A long silence. "I am willing," he said. They met at the church, under the same mango tree where they had shared chin-chin on a happy Saturday that felt like a lifetime ago. Purity arrived first. She sat on the low wall and folded her hands and prayed quietly until she heard his footsteps. He looked the same. Plain shirt, simple trousers. A face that was honest and open and a little more tired than she remembered. She stood up. "Thank you for coming." He nodded and sat on the wall. He did not say anything yet. He waited, the way he always had. So Purity spoke. She told him she was sorry. Not a short, easy sorry, but a real one. She told him that she had known what God wanted, and she had chosen fear over faith. She told him that she had let her mother's voice become louder than the Holy Spirit's voice in her heart, and that it had cost her more than she could say. She told him about the gala and Henry's cruelty and the night she sat on her bedroom floor and could not pray. She did not ask him to take her back. She had not come for that. She had come to tell the truth. When she was done, Gabriel was quiet for a long time. Birds moved in the branches above them. A child laughed somewhere inside the church building. "Purity," he said finally, "I prayed for you. Every day. Just like I said I would." He looked at her steadily. "I prayed that God would protect you, even in the middle of choices I could not agree with. I asked God to bring you back to himself, not to me." To himself. She felt tears rise in her eyes. "And it seems he has," Gabriel said softly. He was quiet again. Then, slowly, carefully, he smiled. I am not the same man I was either. These months without you, I grew. I asked God hard questions. And he answered. He paused. I still love you, Purity. But I need to know, are you following God now? Not because I am asking. Not because your mother approves. But because you have chosen it for yourself. Yes, she said. And she knew it was true. Not because the path was clear or easy, but because she had heard the voice and chosen to obey it. At last. Then let us start again, he said. Slowly. Honestly. With God in the middle. She nodded. A tear slid down her face. But it was the good kind of tear, the kind that feels like relief. In the months that followed, things did not fix themselves all at once. Pure Threads went through a hard season. Purity rebuilt it quietly and carefully, without shortcuts. She hired a new assistant. She went back to serving the customers she had always served, at prices they could afford, with the quality they had always trusted her for. Slowly, her name came back. Madame Mabel was not a changed woman overnight, but something had shifted in her. She watched her daughter's quiet strength and said less and less about what kind of man Purity should marry. Once, on a Sunday morning, Esther convinced her mother to come to church. Madame Mabel sat in the back, arms folded, saying nothing. But she came. And the Sunday after that, she came again. Fiona was the first to notice what was happening between Purity and Gabriel. You two look different, she said one afternoon, watching them talk after church. Like people who have been through something hard and decided to stay anyway. That is exactly what we are, Purity said. On a quiet Saturday morning, almost exactly 1 year after that first difficult Saturday when Purity had sat beside Gabriel under the mango tree and said, "What if things have to change?" Gabriel got down on one knee in the same garden behind Grace Assembly. He did not have a big ring, but he had a letter, handwritten, 2 pages long, that he had written to God first and to her second, asking for permission from the one who had held them both through everything. Purity read every word. By the end, she was laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, she said, before he even finished asking. They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony at Grace Assembly. Pastor Joshua performed the service. Fiona was the maid of honor. Esther read a verse from Ruth 1 that made half the room cry. Even Madame Mabel cried, not the proud kind of crying, but the real kind. The kind that means something has softened inside you. At the reception, Purity caught her mother's eye across the room. Madame Mabel gave a small, honest smile, not the sharp, decided kind, but a softer one. One that said, "Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps this is right." Purity smiled back. Later that evening, when the music was playing and people were dancing and the last light of the day was coming through the windows in long gold lines, Purity stood still for a moment and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Peace. Deep, real, quiet peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because she was exactly where God had always meant for her to be, in the right place, with the right person, walking in the right direction. She had heard the still, small voice. She had turned away from it and paid a heavy price. But she had come back. And the God who had whispered, "Come back," had been waiting all along, arms open, no anger, only grace. Only grace.